What's the shittiest thing an employer has ever done to you? Last job. I now run my own business. I quit and gave my boss 30 days notice. I timed this, politely, on the beginning of our pay cycle. Because I'm nice. Figured it was easier on everyone with the paperwork. He calls me up at 8 AM on the end of the first 2 weeks. Payday. I'm only paying you 50% for the last 2 weeks, even though I had an email confirmation of my expectation to work and be paid for 30 days. Okay, I said, I'll only work 50%. He was shocked when I only worked 4 hours a day for the next 2 weeks. One of the few people here who has balls. I got another job offer for a position that paid about 50% more than what I was currently making. My supervisor made a counter offer that more than matched it. I just had to jump through some paperwork formalities. That paperwork gets dragged out for about 2 months. When I'm told that the supervisor didn't have the authority to make that kind of counter offer. Instead I was told 10%. Take it or leave it. I had the offer in writing but it wasn't an official document. Fighting it would have been a long uphill battle. I took the 10%, found another job, and left without helping train a replacement with no fricks given. New job was even higher than the original offer, so it all worked out. I wonder how often they don't have the authority and how often that gets said to cheat people afterwards. I got activated and sent to war. When I came home, my employer said I no longer had a job. I called the head of the Department of the Soldiers and Sailors Act and was informed that activated reservists get fired all the time and there is nothing they could do about it. The biggest offenders were the large contractors that build all of the military assets, jets, ships, rockets, etc. My employer was a small electronics company with a lot of government contracts. The colonel at the SSA asked me the name of my company that had fired me. I told the colonel. The response was they have a lot of government contracts. I'll give the CEO a call and let them know that they have fired one of our reservists for answering the call, and we are going to review their government contracts. I was back to work the next day and the human relations manager and my supervisor were in a lot of trouble. The CEO was peeved that those two knuckleheads had jeopardized the main source of income for the entire company over a mid-level employee. It was all a bluff, but fun to watch. I quit for a better job a year later. That company folded a few years later. Not because of me but because they kept too many knuckleheads on the payroll. Now when you say activated, are you saying you're a military-made super mecha death robot? Working at Wendy's, fire dep came by and said our fryer was a fire hazard because of the extremely frayed cords. Got large grip tool and pulled the plug while wearing thick butt rubber gloves. Gave the paper to me, shift lead and highest ranking, that basically said it was fire hazard and it needed to be repaired or replaced. Put an orange sticker over the plug and basically made it very obvious. Unfortunately, we only had 2 fryers, and the other was used for chicken only and we weren't allowed to fry fries in this one. So, the guy leaves and I get to work and hang signs saying blah 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 no fries today, sorry. About 3 hours later night manager comes in and flips. Says that I needed to plug the fryer in ASAP. Told me to rip the orange security tape off, grab the frayed plug, and ignore the safety depth and just plug it back in. I told her no, that I wouldn't do it. My name was on the sheet signing. It was my butt if they came back and saw that we didn't get it fixed. Not only that, but it was a fire hazard. And this bee wanted me to bayhand it when the other guy used a special tool and rubber gloves for it. I told her no. She sent me home and tried to bully others into plugging it in. I told them not to and that it was dangerous and breaking a law by doing it. I tried to explain that by doing it, they could face lawsuits and whatnot, because cameras and I sure as heck wasn't taking the fall for that. Big fight with the manager and finally she just grabs it and plugs it in. She tells me not to bother coming back since I was starting a fight and riling people up. I go outside and call the fire dep and get in touch with the marshal and tell him everything. Watch them pull up before I left. I guess I got her back, but I still lost my job. I don't know where you live, but I'm pretty sure my manager asked me to break the law. I refused, and then she fired me as grounds for something. It's a 2-parter. Part 1. Hires me for full-time permanent position first week of August, then announces on the second week of August that the office will be closing at the end of the year. Part 2. promises excellent severance package for those who stay until the end of the year. I do so, and in the last week the office is open. They then try to take it away from me, telling me I didn't work there long enough to qualify for it. My supervisor was quite peeved at this, so she called corporate HR and arranged it so I got the full package and an apology from the jerkbag who tried to shaft me. This might be the world's only case of HR helping out angry employees. Not me, but a friend a while ago worked for a company that had a mandatory meeting at a hotel on the other side of town. Everyone had to wrap up their work early and drive on over to the hotel. When they got there, a couple of the higher-ups were there directing people either to conference room A or conference room B. As they're all waiting for this thing to start, he noticed that there were only like 10 people in his room. This is for a company that had 100 plus employees. Eventually a manager walks in and is all, "Thank you for coming today. If you're in this room, congratulations, you still have a job. Now please return to work." One of the shittiest ways I've ever heard of for a mass layoff. People weren't even allowed back to the office to collect their things. This reminded me of the time E-Systems, they've since become part of Raytheon, had a fire drill and posted security guards by the entrances. If your access card didn't work going back in, you were laid off and they would bring your stuff from your desk to the exit interviews. I had a job a couple years ago that hired me to do Job A. Job A involves being on call to drive upwards of 10 hours to sites across 2 states where the company gets fined if work isn't completed within 24 hours. Right after starting I get handed Job B to do when not doing Job A. Job B involves repairing equipment necessary for other people doing Job C. It's okay doing Job A and Job B as I can usually get far enough ahead in Job B to not have issues. But times do happen where Job A and Job B are both idle. So, I get given Job C, too. Job C involves performing regular maintenance and the occasional on-call job where the company gets fined if work doesn't get done within 72 hours. It did not take long for me to figure out that, under some circumstances, I'd be forced to either get the company fined for failing at Job A or Job C, while also failing at Job B. I raise concerns and get told that will never happen. Don't worry about it. Within a month it almost happens, but get talked down to and told to do my job. Cue me quitting before I get blamed for getting the company fined. That was a very concise description of what must have been a complex and frustrating situation. Day 1. I am contracted to edit a screenplay for an up-and-coming feature film production. Day 2. I receive the first draft of the aforementioned screenplay. Half of my payment is provided to me. Day 3. I return the edited screenplay to the person who hired me. Day 5. Having heard nothing back from my employer, I follow up with a question about next steps. Day 7. The silence continues, and I start to get worried about the second half of my payment. Day 8. I finally receive a response. In it, I am told that I was budgeted for a minimum number of hours, which I had yet to meet. As a result of editing the screenplay so quickly, I am asked to fill out the remaining time by doing a scene breakdown and a cost analysis of every prop that will appear in the movie. Despite initially wanted to protest, I look at the turn of events as an opportunity. Day 10. The requested documents are sent to my employer. Day 11. Oh, look, the silence is back. Day 13. Neither my emails nor my telephone call are answered. Day 15. I get in touch with another member of the production team and discover that nobody has any idea who I am. It comes to light that the person who'd hired me had subcontracted what was supposed to be their work and had taken the credit for everything that I'd done. This person was subsequently fired from the project after being paid several times more than what I had been promised. I ask to take their place, but am told that the work is already done. Day 200-ish. My name does not appear in the credits. TLDR. I edited the screenplay for a feature film, but I got stiffed on everything important. Laid me off before I had a chance to fill out an expense report. Had to make some deliveries on a Wednesday. Laid me off Friday. I was so overwhelmed that I didn't realize until weeks later. It's not quite the same, but you can deduct this from your taxes. I interned in state government while I studied for the bar exam. I took the exam and kept interning while awaited results. Meantime, Wife got a job in the city we'd both grown up in and wanted to return to, so we planned to move. I gave my 2-week notice and offered to train a replacement. The intern coordinator fired me instead and called me unprofessional. Fast forward a few months. I passed the bar and interviewed for a state government job that I thought would be perfect for me. Went really well. Then I was called a week later and told they passed my name up the chain. This job requires approval from the governor's office, but it was rejected because I was on a government employment blacklist. I am permanently barred from state government employment because I gave 2 weeks notice and offered to train a replacement for a low skill internship that could have replaced me by the end of the day. A manager at work. Now I always try to be helpful. I do my work and try to contribute to make other people's days easier. I arrive to work after school and I'm just about to get changed. A manager comes in and says, "Hey PMMEU smiling, would you be able to bring something from the freezer to the front?" I figured sure, it must be busy. It doesn't hurt me. I don't clock in, just quickly nip to get it. I arrive on the front. The store is completely quiet and the manager is bragging to another manager about how convincing she can be, getting me to work for free. It doesn't seem like much now I've typed it, but by God my blood boiled. And she is the only person I resent. Multiple instances of her being manipulative, but this was the most innocent it seemed and I thought I was genuinely helping. Work delivering pizzas for a local Italian restaurant. One evening I showed up for work and the place was suddenly a Chinese food restaurant. Fully staffed and open. Happened overnight. Never got a phone call. It was a very glitch in the Matrix moment. I work at Sears as a backroom associate. The PMT, Preventative Maintenance Technician, position opened up. The day the old PMT worker put his 2-week notice in, my boss approached me asking if I would like the job. Knowing that the pay was better than my current positions, I was excited and instantly told him yes. The following day they started training me for the position. This went on for about a week or so. They announced that there would be a meeting at the end of the month. Well, I attended the meeting only to be introduced to the new PMT worker. I couldn't believe it. They gave me the job and then took it away just like that. Ever since then, there has been no mention of the incident. They handled the entire situation in such a horrible manner. I guess that's why Sears is one of the top 10 worst places to work at. Frick Sears. My boss's brother died, so for 6 weeks we were doing 70+ hour weeks to cover for him. On his return my mother died and I was sacked for taking a week off. I'm currently supervising anywhere from 7 to 22 guys at work, depending on the season. I don't get paid extra to do this. I just do it because it needed doing, and have been doing quite well at it for the past 14 months. Recently we had quite a few supervisor positions open up. I put in and was interviewed for one of them. My boss called me into his office and informed me that he and the warehouse director felt I was too introverted to be a supervisor. He suggested I start working on coming out of my shell, so if another position opens up I can try again. I'll work on coming out of my shell alright. Going to get a lot practice interviewing for other jobs elsewhere. I was working at a Hardee's in my senior year of high school. I got my only Saturday school ever because I was sneaking out of school early to get to work. My manager wouldn't schedule me according to my school hours and when I asked to be pushed back an hour, she said I would work the hours she gave me or leave. Then I got in trouble and told her what happened and asked again to be scheduled an hour later. She told me you're 18 now. You don't even have to go to school anymore. Right. I'm gonna drop out of high school so I can work at a fricking Hardee's for the rest of my life. I put my 2 weeks notice in the next day. Sometimes those minimum wage jobs teach you not only how to value the dollar, but how to value yourself. 2 very short stories. Old employer put a lot of requirements on me to achieve full-time status. I spent thousands to do so. Then they dropped my contract without notice. Current employer. I worked 18 months without any vacation or even requesting a day off for personal. One of the guys I supervised died, and he happened to be my stepfather. Instead of taking time off for my mother and brothers, I covered all my hours pluses for the next several weeks. running into 100 plus hours per pay period multiple times because the department couldn't handle losing both of us and we were already limping by with temps. I finally ask for a night off to spend with family and help with their things, and my boss tells me no one calls me a liar. I'm currently on a 3-week paid vacation after the bigger bosses heard about that one. Last week my boss gave me a difficult task with an impossible time frame. When the time was up and I said I needed another day to finish, he got all cocky and went, "I know, I don't need it until tomorrow, but I told you I need it today because if I told you I needed it tomorrow you'd say you couldn't get it done until Monday." And when I told him that's not true, he pointed to the fact that I was unable to do the task in his just recently admitted impossible time frame as evidence that I wouldn't have finished it on time if he'd told me when he actually needed it. So, setting me up for failure, and then using the fact that I failed as evidence to say I'm a crappy employee, ain't management grand. Honestly, if he just shut his mouth and said, "Alright, just be sure I can get it tomorrow," it would honestly be a pretty efficient way to manage. He's just a douche and wanted to corner you into some realization. Not exactly my employer, but she was the supervisor directly over me. I was working control, which basically means I spend about 6 hours in a small room, hitting buttons, watching cameras, and filling out paperwork. Nothing too bad, but you can't leave the room until you have someone come and relieve you. Around 4 hours in, I realized that I needed to pee. I called her and asked for someone to relieve me. She said she'd send our other co-worker up when he got rounds done, and then she left. So no one could have relieved me, because you have to have someone on the floor at all times. I called her 3 more times, every time she came back to our floor, but she kept blowing me off. I ended up peeing myself coming down the stairs when she finally came to relieve me, after she'd spent the last 20 minutes standing in the doorway down the hall, shooting the crap with her higher ups after she went for a bathroom break. I could freaking see her from my chair. Heck, I could see the bathroom from my chair, and she still let me pee myself. Joke's on her though. I talked to my lieutenant. He moved me to work with people who actually knew what they were doing, and, after 2 months, I finally got moved to days, which she'd been putting in for forever and not getting. In hindsight, probably should have pee in a trash can. They decided to take taxes out of my paycheck but not give them to the government, so I got audited. It was pretty intense until the IRS realized they were auditing 20 plus employees of the same employer. IRS can be really sweet at times. Bet they were entertained. I'm sure it was like watching kids in a candy store. Made me a supervisor. All the responsibilities of a manager. None of the authority or pay. Team not meeting metrics. All my fault. I was a team lead in one department when a manager job opened in another. I was 100% qualified for it. I had all the experience they wanted and I'd worked with the director and other people on related projects that went really well. I interview. It goes perfectly and the interviewers even tell me that was their best interview. I find out later only 3 people had applied and I, by far, was the best person for it. About 3 weeks later they announced Shitbrain McGee got the job. He seriously is about the worst employee ever. I dang near had a mental breakdown and wanted to burn the place to the ground. I ended up finding a better job with a different co 4 months later. So it all worked out. I ran into one of the ladies that interviewed me later after I left the company. We talked for a few minutes and she said she was disappointed to see me leave, but understood. I flat out told her if they would have made me the manager, I'd still be around and I hoped Shitbrain fricked them over. She then went on to explain that they wanted me for the job, but my current boss told her that they didn't want me to leave because I do too much. So if they were to offer it and I accepted, she would drag out my transition as long as the company would allow. It took several years but the karma train hit that dumb sea good and hard when I was able to advise my VP at the time to not hire her for a very good job because of what she'd done to me in the past. Put in a resume for a new job. IT director. Met with owner. We hit it off. Gave him my desired salary. 54k. He didn't care for it. Left interview and went about my business. I wasn't in a hurry for a job. 4 months later he calls me back and says he'd like to sit down with me again. He mentions that he can't meet my salary request, but we could work out other benefits in its place. I'm more than open to this idea. So we sit down. and decide to knock off about 5k in salary in favor of the company paying for my cell phone and a better than standard vacation package. Now, this company has been around forever, but they never updated their vacation package. It is terrible for new employees. Basically, you have no vacation for your first year at all. Once your second year starts, you start accumulating days off. So basically, by the end of your second year, you now have 5 days off. If you were there for 10 years, you got a second week. So I said I wanted 2 weeks right out of the gate. He agreed, but asked me to be very quiet about this arrangement as it could potentially anger other employees. I didn't get it in writing. 6 months later, my wife and I have planned our very first out-of-country vacation. Beach, Cozumel, all inclusive. A month before said vacation I remind my boss, the owner, that I'll be taking some vacation time, and that I'll need to use those vacation days we discussed when I got hired on. He had no recollection of such an agreement. We've always had the same vacation plan for every employee, so we wouldn't have given you special treatment. I argued with him. It didn't do much good. By the end of the conversation he agreed to let me take 5 days of unpaid vacation, and thus would dock my first post-vacation paycheck. I had resumes out by the end of the week. Thankfully I'm skillful enough in my job so that finding another job of near equal value was pretty easy. 54k for a director role in any field, especially IT, seems pretty low already. When I was 16 I worked at a grocery store. One of my co-workers, 28, kept sending me dong pics and one day cornered me in the break room and started kissing my neck. Someone else came in and he got off me, so I told my manager, "You wanna know what that sucker said? As a woman in the workplace that's just something you're going to have to learn to deal with." I quit right then and there, but I should have reported him to his boss and so on until someone fired that mofo. Frick you. 1. My boss started pushing me around and roughing me up in front of customers because I was in his way. Ended up with a cut to the eye. I tried to be professional and play it off to the customers. This was 2 days ago, so I currently writing a formal grievance letter. Hopefully he'll get fired. I'd also recommend going to the doctor to make sure a cut so close to your eye doesn't get infected, and then make absolutely sure the doctor knows it happened at work, and you'll therefore need to claim workman's comp. It's funny how quickly companies start paying attention when they get a workman's comp claim. When I was 18 I had a boss who constantly told me how stupid and useless I was, which was annoying, but I tolerated it because I needed the job. But then he started making comments about how hot my mom was, and eventually tried to move me around the office when I was in his way by grabbing my hips and pushing me. So I walked out. Another boss around this time spilled coffee beans on the floor, asked me to clean it up, then walked around behind me to watch and said, "Now there's a sight I like." That one I didn't walk out of, but it ended even worse because through some shady tax crap he was doing we all ended up paying tons of money come tax season, even though he'd evidently been taking taxes out of our paychecks all year while he ran away to Canada. Our taxes are pretty high here in Canada, not the place to run to if you are trying to pay less, lol. Years ago I was working for a small retail company. We had a truck come in that we needed to unload. It was a 600+ box truck that we had to unload by hand. This particular day was incredibly hot. By around 8 AM it was already 85. My boss stuck my happy butt in the truck by myself to unload it. When I asked for water she said no and that I needed to finish unloading the truck before I was allowed to take a break. I just looked at her and said why yes massa, then got written up. Hooray. At Sonic, and basically any place that pays you waiter's wage, is supposed to make up your tips if you don't make enough to make whatever the minimum wage is. So if you made $4 HR and worked for 10 hours, you would be expected to make $37.50 to pull your hourly wage up to the minimum. Say, $7.75. My employer stiffed us instead. My former boss didn't understand basic math, and we were all underpaid because of it. For example, if I worked 7 hours 30 minutes he would pay me for 7.3 hours instead of 7.5. It doesn't seem like much, but it added up quickly. I figured it out after looking at my paychecks closer, and it took weeks to explain to him how he was wrong. Luckily I was reimbursed, and my co-workers were also, even though he begged me not to tell anyone. Oh, it sounds to me like he understood basic math perfectly well, but then I'm a disgusting cynic. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.